I'm Doug Richardson, and this is photography the way I see it. Hey YouTube, welcome back to another episode of Photography the Way I See It. This is going to be an abbreviated episode. I want to apologize to some of my viewers. Some of the videos that I've done so far, I talked about depth of field, but I failed to explain what depth of field was, and I did have a couple people ask, and for that I do apologize. So I'm briefly going to explain that, and I'm just going to make an episode out of it. So what depth of field is? We talked about the aperture, the openings, 2.8, 4, 5.6, 16, whatever you happen to be using. And depth of field is how much of the picture is in focus. And I'm going to put a couple pictures up. We'll talk about one at a time here in a minute. But whenever you focus on the subject, there's going to be so much of that photograph in front of the subject and so much of that photograph behind the subject that is all going to be in focus. Okay? And the wider open your lens is, f4, 2.8, okay, the narrower that focus area is going to be. So if you're shooting around 11 or 16, then that area is going to widen and you're going to get more of that area in focus. So the first picture I'm going to put up here is a photograph of a girl. I believe this is a senior photograph. She's lying in the grass. Nice little pose with the hat on there. And if you notice, the grass in the foreground is completely out of focus. And then the focus leads you back to her. And then after her face is in focus and she starts to go off, the photograph starts to go off into the distance, into the background, there's nothing in focus behind her either. That's because there's virtually no depth of field in that picture. It was shot at 2.8. Okay, that's an example of that. Okay, the next picture is going to be a photograph of a boy in basically a field of pumpkins. And this is probably a very good example. If you notice, if you start at the bottom of the picture and work your way through the pumpkins, you see that as the closer you get to the subject, the more of the pumpkins are in focus. And then you'll find that area where it's sharp. Then you get to the subject. And then after you get behind the subject, the focus starts to fall off again. Okay? With the same idea, the smaller the f-stop, the more of the field of pumpkins, the field of view, depth of field, would be in focus. So if you want very little depth of field, meaning very little of that area in focus, that's when you speed up your shutter speed and use your larger f-stops, which would be the smaller numbers, such as 2.8 or 4 or wherever your lens goes to. Should you want as much depth of field as possible, then that's when you would slow your shutter down and go with the smaller f-stops, such as 8, 11, 16. You're going to have to be careful because your shutter is going to slow down, but you will get that extra focal distance and that extra depth of field. So I hope that clears that up for you. And thanks for coming back for this. See you on the next one.